Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to present some of the work I've been conducting for the past 7 years. And without any surprise, I'll be speaking about virtual reality and its use for healthcare and as well as training for healthcare professionals. So just a few words to introduce me. Originally, I did a PhD in psychological science. I was working on space perception, embodiment theory, and virtual reality. And my PhD aim was to demonstrate that we don't perceive the space only with our senses, but it's a whole construct happening in the brain where our body and its action representation can contribute to the perception of space, notably with the definition of peripersonal space, extrapersonal space, or personal intimate space. And what we try to demonstrate with VR is that by increasing people's arm length during some practice session inside of VR, after this extension of the action capabilities, they were perceiving distance as being shorter. And you might have experienced the same kind of thing when you go back to a place you were as a child. Things appear way smaller than back then. It's because your body is kind of an anchor, a reference to your perception of space. Because you don't perceive the real world, you perceive the construct that your brain is creating. And so this is maybe our first personal virtual reality. But that was before. After that, in 2018, I started working in Serein, in an ambulance provincial school, and on the Orvami project. And the aim was to create scenarios to train ambulance personnel. And then after those 2 years, we submitted a spin-off funding in Wallonia. And so the aim here was to kind of convert myself from researcher to entrepreneur, and to create our own company to carry on the work we've been doing. And I'll be presenting that more in details later. So a few words about immersive technologies. I like to introduce by saying it's not that new, although it's starting to come in our everyday life more and more. But at start, there was the Sensorama machine from Morton Ely, and he created also the first binocular camera. And he was capturing environments, but he was also putting 3D sound. There was a vibrating chair. There was some olfactory diffuser. So trying to recapture all the senses. And on the other hand, Ivan Sutherland is kind of considered like the first augmented reality and head tracking device. It was so heavy, it needed to be suspended from the ceiling, not to break your participant headset. And these technologies kind of highlight two strong characteristics of virtual reality. First is they try to create multisensorial experience, trying to capture both vision, audio, but sometimes even beyond, like proprioception or olfactory stimuli. But they also create an experience within a 3D space, so you are not limited by your screen, you are not looking at content through a window. You enter the content and you can use your body to move into space of those VR experiences. And so people have started using different terms like VR, AR, XR, MR, not the one from Georges Louis, but the idea here is try to facilitate the comprehension of the different subtypes of technology. So here's a real picture of the Liège train station. So it's a real picture. It's not because the sky is blue that it's not real. And virtual augmented reality is the fact of you wear a headset, you still see the reality, but you can add some layer of 3D elements. Like if you are short in post-it, you could display 20,000 post-it in the space around you. Augmented virtuality is more when you use real elements to augment the virtual space. So for example, you have a virtual coffee machine, and then you use some type of coffee to have a real smell of coffee and augment the virtual machine. Or here's a famous example called called a plank. People just put a plank on the floor, and inside the VR headset, they see a virtual plank, which coincides to the real plank. And so touching it with their feet give them additional sensation. Then you have the full virtual, full VR experience. So the more you come this way, the more you enter the matrix. And they used to say mixed reality is kind of the umbrella term, but after they say no, because mixed reality stops here. So they invented this new term called extended reality. And in the end, what's in the name? I think globally, using the term immersive technology is quite easier to englobe all those tech. And some say it's not even VR or AR, it's the metaverse or the spatial computing era. So this is what Apple is trying to push forward, is to say that computer informatics is not going to be limited by a single or second screen, but that you can deploy your favorite application in your everyday life, but also deploy your productivity and work in informatics on several displays around you. So that's one of the use. I'm not working in Apple, I don't have any fun things. But what interested me more is how we use it in the healthcare sector. One of the first stream of application and work was around reducing pain, stress, some kind of meditation in VR. And this is used even in medical intervention. And the advantage of VR compared to classic sedation is that you don't use a substance. You try to put the patient into a state of virtual hypnosis, and they've demonstrated that you can diminish the quantity of drugs to the patients by using this alternative sedation procedures. Another use is in cognitive psychology, mainly in exposure therapies. So a lot of psychologists, they try to expose their patient to the objects of fear. Patients have phobias, and VR allows them to gradually expose them to different fearful situations. For example, people who are afraid of closed space or even afraid of having too many people around. With VR, the patient can be immersed and the therapist can accompany him in this stepwise procedure because he can manipulate the number of people, for example, in the environment, or he can also manipulate the level of lights. And obviously for playing a phobia, it's easier to go on a virtual reality ride and to take a view. This is Eric Malbos, who's a psychiatrist in Marseille, and he created a company called C2Care. But they also work with addiction. So you can have a bottle of whiskey, some cannabis, and to really, again, expose the patient to his stimuli that he has difficulties with. And so they also did some work to fight against the fear of speaking in public. So more and more research. This is some paper from a researcher in Switzerland, where they try to help people practicing speaking publicly. And the interesting thing here is they can manipulate the reaction of the audience. So people can all look at you like this, or people can nod and be smiling. And it's to prepare people, how do you react? How do you manage when you have an audience that is not nodding, but is like, I'm not really agreeing and really helping you to build better confidence. This is some pictures from a lab in HEC Liège, where Michael Schietz, you can see his 3D representation. They also did some work about publicly speaking, and they even recreated a law for the law school, a courtroom, so that law student can practice being in a court and being able to plaidoyer. I don't know to say in English. Another example can be also here introduced with physiotherapy. And so it's starting now more and more that physios can use this kind of technology to make the re-education and revalidation of patients who have a stroke with VR, and to create exercises that are more engaging and more diversified, and they can attack different type of difficulties. For example, the vestibular system, the inner ear is very sensitive to VR, and so they can, for example, put you on a boat on a virtual sea and manipulate the strength of the wave and help the person to progressively support more and more vestibular tinnitus like symptoms. Or you can do some yoga or some sport. Personally lost some extra kilograms thanks to VR. And here, another nice example is for the training of radiography students, because here teacher cannot bring X-ray into the school, but they still need to teach students in medical imagery how to manipulate this kind of systems. And it's better to send virtual radiation to a virtual patient than to send real radiation to a real patient. And so it's a way of introducing how to do this kind of scanner. And also the difficulties that they need to take the students to hospital, but hospital don't always have the time to welcome student or for very short period. So again, it's a nice in between the theory and the practice. So and they try to reflect the real parameters, and then you can see the radio you took and compare different sessions. Other use here is a company in Namur called Transport, who specialize in simulation of trains and metro. And here it's more of a mixed reality system, because as you can see here, the cabin is real, so the person can see his hands, can manipulate real objects, and those elements kind of represent a driving cabin for driver. But everything that appears outside of this cabin is fully virtual. So again, it's better to practice on the virtual environments than to create potential assets on the real world. And so I'll finish by focusing on simulation and how it is a very powerful tool for training. And I think those two images speak from themselves, in the sense that you prefer that you're playing pilots. It's not like, this is my first time, hi everyone, have a good flight. And same for medical team, it's better that their first time is not on the real patient. And that's why simulating training, but also having strong debriefing at the end is quite key for the trainings of those professionals. And so here you can see a multidisciplinary emergency situations training, where you have firefighters, medical people, personnel, and the police who have to work in a live scenario to save actors that plays the roles of victims. And so imagine the effort to put all those people the same day, but also organizing such a training. And in best case scenario, they do those kind of training once or twice a year. And so in my research, the aim was to provide not something to replace, but something to complement, and to, again, try to fill the gap between theoretical PowerPoints and those kind of live training. And so to create immersive learning experience, I really like the work of Bertrand Mann from Paris. He's an expert on serious game design. And what he tried to explain is that you really need to have a pedagogical expertise, but also a game design expertise. And first thing usually you try to do is tackle the pedagogical things, and to first set the objective, the learning outcomes you want for your learners, but also try to identify what kind of learners are you talking to. Is it adolescents, young adults, or maybe elder people? Also, usually you need to have an expertise in the domain you want to simulate. You can be very good in pedagogy, but have no clue about how ambulance personnel worked in write that down and have something the most structured as possible before you start doing the 3D models, gathering some audio files, and then you start coding the programmation. Then you try to have different chapters, different scenarios that your learners can progress with. So that's a bit what we do for big catastrophe, emergency scenarios we wanted to create in VR. So first, one of the objectives is that they need to perform victim triage in terms of big incidents, and depending on different parameters, the victim is either yellow, red, or black. So yellow means it's not so urgent. For example, victim that can walk will be straight target as yellow. Red means needs to be quickly evacuated and along to the hospital nearby. And black is, unfortunately, you are not certain that you are going to be able to save that person. So if you start doing a CPR or so on, then you put all your resources onto that person that you are not certain of saving. Well, maybe there is 3 other people who just need a quick intervention that can be saved. And so it's really, one of the aim was to make them switch from an individual emergency logic to a collective emergency logic, which is not so easy for them because it does not luckily happen often. But we also wanted to familiarize the different bleeding control procedures, which types of rules for which types of engines, because they know the technical manipulation, but sometimes when they are in cognitive overload in an emergency, and I know how to do this compressive bandage, I know how to do a compressive bandage, but that patient, I don't know which is the best care I can provide. So try to do this matching between wounds and first aid procedures. And then also we try to reproduce kind of the different environments, the different parameters that are put in place when you have a big catastrophe. So in fact, the red zone is where the fire is, or where sometimes there is a shooting, mass shooting. And so the red zone is a no-go for the medics. It's only for police and firefighters. And so mainly we simulated this area, so trying to gather the victims and evacuate them towards the advanced medical post. And so in our 3D environment, we try to reproduce these environments and try to incite the learners, you don't go in the red zone. And, so here you have an idea of one of our scenarios, which is a shooting that occurred in a restaurant. Okay. So it was one of the virtual victims who was making a very report. But as you can see, they have interaction panels where they can gather information on the top row, then select triage below, and then choose evacuate. And then in the scenario, there is around 10 to 15 victims. And so the aim is to quickly see each of the victim, evaluate the parameters, choose the correct triage, and eventually do certain actions. Like she's unconscious, she needs to be put in recovery position to protect her airway, and so on. And so these scenarios have been used. So we have 6 scenarios, and they've been used in Liège and Brussels ambulance schools for about 2 years now. So we try to continuously improve. And how it goes in a training session is, in fact, you have 5 other learners that are sitting there, and each of them do a different scenarios. And what's important is really the debriefing phase.
Sorry
yes.
to interrupt, but does the virtual reality tool take into account that patients have different ways, that they are happy, and that it's not just clicking and okay, I did it? And
yeah, to me, I often say that it's important to put the human factors in the center, but also around these kind of tools. And so, to me, the tool is just a situational tool, but it's really what the trainer is going to pinpoint at the end of the training that is important. But here, the triage decision algorithm is how it is. And it's just the health ministry that said, if you have more than 10 victims, it needs to be fast and you need to be able to adjust your priorities. But obviously, we have a scenario with children. It's a bit different for the taking care of those particular victims, in the sense that you don't send a child alone to the advanced medical post. So there you often say that you need to pair them with the adults, ideally adults they know, so either a teacher or parents. But in the law and in the official textbook, they don't take it into account the weight of the, they do that in the second triage that occurs in the advanced medical post, where you have emergency nurses and doctors. But here, it's sometimes it's called a pre-tri, so it's a quickly triage that needs to be, but it's really about going into this area. But there is indeed a second triage there, and I think they have pediatric and adult triage. But sometimes they also do what they call a fast lane, that from there the victim will bypass the advanced medical point, go straight to the hospital, because otherwise you have very low success. So another project we started a bit more recently with the hospital of the Citadel from Liège was the possibility to create trainings for the trauma center. And so the trauma center is, so several hospitals have what's called a shock room, which is kind of the anti-chamber of the emergency. And so patients first arrive at this shock room where the team needs to keep them into good, as best as they can, into good condition, and also try to identify exactly what kind of trauma they have, and to propose different scannings or different follow-up procedures. Do they need to go to the operating room straight after? So it's really the link between the field and the emergency department. And so they ask us kind of to reproduce their shock room. So they were already doing this kind of simulation, but the difficulty they had is to use those mannequins that are not, some mannequins are quite advanced, like they can breathe, they can circulate, but it's using this kind of mannequins is quite limiting. If you want to have a pregnant woman, a child, or different patients, then you are stuck with these kind of things. And also often what they had is that they start early in the morning, set up the whole training, and they start the training, and then 1 minute into training, they say, oh, there's a real emergency coming in, stop the whole training. So all your preparation goes to rubbish, and especially they need to remove everything and make sure the elements, the training material and the real material doesn't get mixed up, because it can be quite problematic. So again, not to replace this kind of simulation, but to help them be better prepared. We kind of try to reproduce their shop room environments where the first try. We did clean up a bit because it was quite messy in the shop room, but then they say, no, put back the messing, because this is how it is in the emergency street. So we've recreated some avatars, because one of the important aspects of that training is that you embody a team leader, and you need to be able to brief your team on different elements of the environment. And we have so far 5 scenarios. So, for example, he's a soccer supporter from Charleroi who's a bit angry, so he screams during the handover, and he got shot in the liver. We have a road accident, a bike accident. It's a pregnant woman who has a placenta décollement, how you say that. But it's really about to helping the professional to be able to detect sufficiently early. And so we respect kind of the European trauma course chapters and sequence. And so you have an initial call, then you have the briefing of your team, where you need to assign each people to different roles. And after this, you have the patient handover. So the patients arrive, the emergency personnel, the SMUR people. So here the trainer provides the information. So it's really about getting what happened, how was the mechanism of the incidents and so on. So there's an algorithm called the I3h, which has the age of the patient, the time of the accident, the mechanism of the accidents, and so on. And then after that, it's really the main chapter of the simulation is really to see how the parameters evolve, so we can make them evolve into different phases, and which equipment or intervention you need to proceed. So it's mainly by talking with the trainer that the team leader, learner can go through that scenario. And so here, a small video of how it looks like inside the headset. So, for example, in this scenario, it's specifically centered on the respirator machine. So they need to verify whether the tube is deep enough with the radiation to see whether the ventilation parameters are correctly adjusted, so on. So this is a training. It's been a bit less than a year that they start using it at the hospital. So again, it's a work in progress, but we've tested around 40 people into this. And what they asked us for 2025 is to be able to put several people together in the simulation. So having 2 nurses and 2 medics working together, each having their own role. So that nurse usually is mainly doing drug administration preparation. That doctor is mainly investigating the circulation parameters, while the other is more focusing on airway. And having the possibility again to change the monitoring during the training. So last project I'll present is it's a training that is quite known. It's in Canada they thought of this kind of training first. Is a room of error. So you enter an hospital room and you need to find problematic elements. Like for example, the debit is not correct, or the thing is not dropping, or the patient cannot reach his so that's a ring the device that can call for help. And so we've created a 3D version, because in fact, just having a room that is not used for the training is quite valuable for hospital, because they are lacking room. And again, it's 1 learner at a time, but between session, the trainer needs to put back all the errors in place. And so here with a 3D version, it just selects the errors and redeploys them. So this is how it goes in classic versions. And here we've tried to recreate. It's also with the Citadel Hospital, and what they appreciate is the flexibility of the system and the possibility to select different sets of errors. They also have a DPI, so a patient folder informatized patient's documents. So here you have just a quick look of how it looks like from inside the headset. And so it's really kind of trying to explore all the environment and find potential problems. So this is the patient administrative file. So there is several tabs that they can access and see different information. So this is again in development, but we will be launching in 2025 some trainings with nurses. And here, what they really appreciate it for is to the onboarding of new staff. New staff in the hospital, they have a 1 week. So this kind of that we create. So the team I represent, we're made of 5 persons. We are very lucky to have a medical expert who's an anesthesiologist. He just retired, so he has a bit of extra time to help us really validate the tools we create. And we have 2 IT programmers and a 3D artist that mainly do interface and 3D. So the mission we try to pursue is really to provide the potential of immersive VR for healthcare and mainly training and simulation. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I'll be very glad to answer your questions. Maybe do a little demo afterwards, once who are here in presence.
Can I ask you, you said you trained now 40 people, 40 separately, so they asked to be put in the room together with other people there. Are they then in the same room, or can you do it in different locations? For example, when people are home working, can they enter, or?
So that's the following step. So in fact, at the moment, they are trained individually and they incarnate the team leader. But what they want is to have 4 people at the same time and also work with different soft skills like communication and how the whole team follow the procedures and the sequence. So the first trials we'll be doing it in a single room where each learner has its own simulation space, but with the internet, you could potentially easily connect people at different locations, or someone that is at home could join the session from home. But its difficulty at the moment is that not everyone has headsets, and that's what the ETC organization, which works on a European level, they say, we would want a e-learning version where people could just use keyboard and mouse to navigate and have a little avatar. And maybe at some point we'll have a mix in the sense that one of the role is the scribe. So the scribe is really the right hand of the team leader who kind of take notes of every element, the change of parameters, the drugs that has been administered. But writing in VR is not really functioning. So for that specific role, he's following the simulation from a classic screen and have all the papers. So it's kind of outside the VR environment. He can still see and talk to his colleague. But what we think that is interesting with this asymmetry is that it will force the learners to really communicate precisely so that the person who's taking notes will have to be extra precise and so on. Otherwise, at the end of the training, you might not have gathered all the information. And sometimes that's how mistakes are made, is that they did not say, okay, I already administered this, and then they re-administer something that should not.
But also I was thinking, if they are all in another room, you can for sure create or code an environment, but also having different people in an operation room, you can really block each other by standing in the way.
Yeah, exactly. So there in VR there is 2 big type of multi-user. Either you have the home skill, so everyone is kind of in a single box, let's say. But you have also the free roaming, where everyone's sharing the same physical and virtual space, and in this case they can go into each other. But in terms of setting up, it's easier if we have 4 different headsets and 4 different space than having to track like 200 meters square. But in gaming location, they have this kind of huge area, lots of QR codes around so that the headset can track itself.
And for the And for the writing, would you not? But I'm not really not technically in this sense, but couple it to the facilities of remarkable or where you write and it's immediately translated into electronic notes.
It should. Actually, that's maybe something that will arrive, but at the moment they are still using plastic paper. But you have also difference in hospitals. Like in Liège, it's really three A4 where they take notes and describe the whole case. But in Charleroi, they have a huge poster and they do that with a flip chart marker and they fill in the information of the patient within this giant poster. So from one hospital to another, you can have also
or
different
even
practice.
the doctors just dictating in a dictaphone
Yeah,
and then it's translated.
but I think in this case, it's really super succinct and like they just have the essential. So I'm not sure that having the whole speech could, but it's quite a structured way of taking notes and writing down the sequencing of the operation, not operation, but the procedure. But English is not too warmed up.
We have a question from Antonio from
Maybe I can go first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, so in such room, they need to practice, as a team, they are not in an augmented reality, right? And should it be possible to add, well, for example, if they need to check the blood pressure, practice emergency cardiac methods? I know if those things are possible and if they are, yeah, you don't know exactly.
So for the radio pearls, so in the ambulance training, what they could do is put one of the controllers, these kind of controllers in their hands. And if they put it at the wrist level of the victims, there was a vibration that gives those controls can vibrate. So it's a way of mimicking taking the pills. But in the end, control-wise in the training session, it took time to teach them how to get the pulse and so on. So just getting the button was quicker. And for CPR, more procedure, one of the weak points of PR is really the physical, tactile, and force feedback elements. But more and more, mixed reality might solve that in the sense that now some application they superpose training mannequin who has the even measure the depthness of your movements and so on, the regularity. And on top of that, they put the VR, the virtual avatar. And so you kind of blend both advantages. But it's some programs exist, but it's still in development. I mean, there is an entrepreneur and medic from Ghent called Nicolas Potos, and what he created was really this mannequin on a trolley, and people can practice CPR on those mannequins, and every performance is recorded, and then the trolley can move around in the hospital, reach. So I think maybe 5 years will be more and more regular to try to blend it.
We have a question from Antonio Estache.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Just to let you know, I mean, for those of us listening to this from outside, we can't really hear the answers to the question. I mean, can hear the questions, and we can only guess the answers to the questions. I have three questions for you. One of them, thanks. One of actually first comment. Thanks a lot for this. Quite interesting and quite challenging. So I'm an economist by training. So my first question is about cost. How much does it cost, and how cost effective is it to train people this way rather than any other way? The second question is about ethics. How do you build in? I mean, you talked a lot about triage in training, and one of the big dimension is ethics in that context. And related to that would be the third question is increasingly now in medicine, we're using when we see the use of artificial intelligence becoming a partner in many decisions. How do you deal with that? So 3 questions.
Okay, so first question about the cost. What we decided for our spin-out company is to work as a yearly license. So each of our modules or tools are around 8,000 euro a year for unlimited use of the scenarios that are embedded. But if you need extra trainings or so on, we do on-demand pricing. For example, we have also an hospital that is interested in the trauma center, but they want their own environment. So it's a mix of the basic package, and we do on-demand development for a tailored solution.
What's the standard training budget for a hospital?
Well,
So that I
hospital,
can compare.
specifically for the emergency department or for the whole?
Yeah, I mean basically the product that you're delivering.
Yes.
What percentage of the budget in a hospital would that pick up?
Well, it's not a huge budget in sense of all the medical apparatus is a huge budget. And if you take a mannequin, for example, a simulation mannequin, it can go from 10,000 to 50,000 euro if you want your mannequin to breathe and so on. I don't have very precise number by head, but some hospital, especially the one who have the trauma center accreditation, they are accredited from an organ called the DGU, which is a German, and so I think it's around 10 hospitals in Belgium. And so the German DGU comes in hospital and check the whole facility, the whole organization, what type of resource they use, but they also check the number of training they organize, and they need to meet certain quota or they lose their accreditation. So that's where we I think can bring value to those hospitals, is that the simulation cost can be quite elevated because sometimes you need to have some specific cameras and microphone that record the whole settings, which is important for the debriefing afterwards. But also having trainers, having 2 or 3 trainers that are mobilized for those training is also a cost important. And one of the objectives with our solution is also diminishing the number of trainers that needs to be there to pilot the mannequin, to pilot the simulation. So that's some elements of risk.
Maybe interesting to quantify that so that you can show the cost effectiveness of your product.
In fact, that's something we are ongoing
to
do, but it's difficult. From one hospital is different, from one department is different. Like for the room of errors, we work with the quality department, which has also some budgets, but that can be joined with the trainings department. And sometimes you have innovation departments, which each have different budgets, but it's.
No, you can have an average and then a variance so that we can have a sense of what this means, right?
But really being able to clearly compare classic simulation with our tools and have a different budget evaluation would be also useful to us to demonstrate that there is a return of investment. So for the second question about ethics, I will need to ask you if you can precise a bit more what you mean by ethical aspects. Like, for example, if you have children victims in the scenarios, that actually people shouldn't behave the same with children or adults.
Oh, you can have that kind of situation. You can have a rationing of medication, and you decide who's going to get the medication. How do you train them about these issues? And increasingly now, if you look at, I mean, linking it to the third question about artificial intelligence, you'd have a margin of error on that one. Who do you trust? How do you decide who has the last word on this thing, for instance? How do you train them about
Who's
that?
legally responsible, maybe? Because in the end of the day, it's the doctors, the physical person who
Yeah, but you have several in the room. Which one decides? I mean, my point is that the more I read about this sort of issues, right, with the changes in technology, it becomes highly mechanical, and you're losing the human side of it.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering how much you guys can think about sort of restoring the human side so that we avoid just being engineers. We're also psychologists in a sense, if you want.
Yeah. I mean, from my point of view, as a psychologist, I often say that to the trainers that they bring the added value to the tool and not the other way around. And so in the ambulance school and the Citadel Hospital, they have a lot of trainings about debriefing. And that usually the simulation session is as long or even sometimes shorter than the debriefing session. Because it's during the debriefing that they can first pinpoint what went well, what was more difficult. But also, as you see, put the human sense into this. And when I say to the trainers, the VR tool is just a situational tool. You put people in situation, but it's the discussion that it's going to elicit and how people are going to think about the actions afterwards in the debriefing that has, to me, the real pedagogical value. But so,
yeah, okay.
So to me, our tool is firstly there to elicit discussions and debate with the trainers during the debriefing.
But the briefing is outside of the software, I guess.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about your room of errors, right? I mean, you have very different types of errors. Some of them are highly associated with ethical concerns, and some other are just mechanical. And making sure that they think about these sort of issues more explicitly may be useful to consider having it as part of the software rather than just debriefing. Because it forces you to think about it ex ante rather than ex post.
So for that particular project, what the trainers ask us is to be able to kind of record the which error was found the most quickly and the most often. And for that training, what we are preparing is that they go individually in the room of errors, but then the debriefing goes in an auditorium with a group of 20, 25 people, and that during this debriefing, they can highlight kind of the statistics of the simulation and say nobody found that error, everyone found that error, but then after they can come back on why is it important to consider this error. As you say, concerning the risk, it can lead to and kind of the gaming simulation aspect is then used again as a vector to have the important discussion about the health and safety practice, and but also explaining the consequence of the error in the sense that that's what they do in sensibilization is that they try to highlight and explain to those people that these kind of error can lead to these kind of consequence, and that sometimes the staff don't make necessarily this link between a small error or error that can be made in the everyday practice, but then the heavy consequences. And we were lucky to meet with I3h insurance company a couple of weeks ago. And I think with them, we can even go further because they have also all the data of incidents and statistics, and also kind of which incidents cost the most to society, to the hospital, but also a human cost for the relative and the family. So we might improve this tool in that direction, trying to also pinpoint with the most occurring error, which sometimes can be quite easily avoided.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And but it's true that AI and ethics there's also a lot of things to dig in, but it can't be on all the front at the same time.
Food for thought.
Exactly.
Maybe another question, do you have a lot of competition? Because, well, I saw couple of months ago, I think, on the Dutch news, that there is now AI for retirement homes to train people there to let them feel how it is to treat immobilized elderly people or blind or bad vision. Do you have competition there, or do you say, no, well, we are focusing on training hospital, emergency, triage, personnel more than retirement homes?
So to me, I'm someone that, like most researcher, I'm a touche à tout, so I like to try different things, and I've worked on some physiotherapy and neuropsychology projects as well, as support for some teams. But for a company, we need to focus, at least as a first step, onto those three projects I presented. But it's true that for example, the ambulance simulation, it's maybe not as easy to propose, but also for the ambulance school to have a budget for that, compared to the room of errors of the trauma center, where in this case, the hospital gains from it because they fill in the criterion for accreditation and so on. But for the room of error, we have a strong competitor in France for Simon Group. I think they do quite nice tools. Maybe the graphics is a bit lower in the sense that we use PC connected VR, but there is also some autonomous VR, so you don't need a PC, but it can lower a bit the graphics quality. But again, for us, so they have scripted feedback and automated feedback, and for us, what we really want to do is to have the trainer as a master on those tools. So for example, for the trauma center, it's the trainer who can pilot quite a lot of elements. So it's kind of the orchestra chief of the training. So I think that's what differentiates us from our competitors, is that we are more putting a powerful tool in the hand of the trainers rather than having automatized training sessions. And for the trauma center, we have a competitor in Sweden, I think, who also quite focus on trauma. And I think they work with Singapore team for the development, so it's for them maybe complicated sometimes to get a thing, but I mean their tool is quite good as well. So it's now we are also trying to improve our differentiating factors so that our company can step up. And I think that's how we interact with the trainers and try to value and their capability on the training to develop.
And it's, well, it's just an idea to then also directly contact the accreditor, because they are the ones saying what is needed to get your accreditation. So maybe if you have a certification from them, you are more likely to gain new customers. And no?
Oh yeah, that's the best when your product is labeled with seal of quality. Or, but so we meet them beginning of November. In fact, they came 2 years ago in the Citadel. We had the first version of one of the scenarios, and they say kind of, I'm curious to see how it evolves and how you're going to put it in the user, because it's kind of the natural evolution. And so that's when we'll be meeting them again, we'll present the work and see whether, and it might be that they need to have a neutral,
Yeah.
and so that we might not get their seal of approval, but that's why we are trying to really collaborate with the European Organization of Trauma Course. Even they ask an e-learning version and non-immersive version, it's still a way to deploy the things we developed.
Interesting.
No, I have a question. Do you think such a tool would have been useful when we were at the very beginning of the COVID-19, where the hospitals were overwhelmed and we needed to do some triage of patients, I would say? So do you think such a tool could be adapted as a training for a future pandemic, or?
That's one of the requests we had from the hospital in Luxembourg, is what they call the I3h, which is the hospital emergency planification. And so this is again some triage that occur at the entrance of an hospital when patients arrive. They also have to triage. In Luxembourg, they had 7 colors because they had different colors for children, for adults, so. But in the end, they were going to open a simulation center, but the building got taken from someone else, so it went through. But it's something that actually could be done, and that's why I like the question about the etiquette also, more than giving a guidance of a good or bad choice, is preparing them that at some point they might have to make some tough choice. And some of the nurse went to Saint Luc, I think it was 3 months ago, and they were also giving similar ideas that they have this central hub where they have the information of the 10 or 15 rooms around. And if there are 3 rooms that ring, where an alarm rang at the same time, and which room do they attend first? And so it was a bit on the same logic. And they say I'm being nice to develop it, but it's always who's finding these kind of tools. It's true, and it's still halfway research, halfway entrepreneurship, but that's also where you can gather strengths and get consortium. There's more that I suppose.
It's actually why I asked the question about the weight. Is it taken into account? Because you showed when the person of the ambulance, the nurse, had to turn the patient because he was in a critical situation. You can know that you need to turn the patient, but if it takes you a lot of time or you need a second hand to do it safely, you might get demotivated because you think in this way I will do 10 patients in this time, but it takes you, let's say, 50 minutes to do one handling. It's not ticking a box, and the virtual experience might be completely different. And then there's, of course, the emotional shock of seeing this horrific situation, that these things for me are also very important to take into account and to learn to the person that
but
it's
I
not
see
ticking
better
a box.
now
You see
what
that?
you meant with the effort required for types of patients and so on. And that's also why I say we don't want to replace all the types of training. I think it's about having an eventide suite of different complementary pedagogical means, but that concerning triage, at some point we had some weight, so each action can cost several seconds because there is a timer, so you could attribute more weights to different actions. At some point we also had a limited capacity of, so you don't have 20 tourniquets in 20,000 bandage, but you are limited by the number of bandage you have in your backpack. So also to create this sense of, but I think what we aim mainly is helping them master the decision algorithm and do sometimes a refresh case. And so it's more about decision making than having the skills. Because doing a tourniquet, so they have practice workshop that are complementary.
We have a question from Matthias.
Yes, hello. So yeah, it's all interesting. I'm also an economist. This question about ethics, I think, are indeed quite challenging. At the same time, I think there may be a double standard. For example, with self-driving cars, people are always saying, you know, it will be a disaster because a self-driving car will have to choose whether, in case of potential accident that you cannot avoid, do you kill the pedestrian in front of you, or do you send the car to
You're the driver, yeah.
the wall and then risk hurting the passengers and all that? This being said, you know, human-driven cars, they do these kind of choices too. And on top of that, they seem to be doing a lot of mistakes. So I think the prediction is that self-driving cars would be safer on average. At the same time, I think they are held to a higher standard, possibly because they have to explain what the strategy is from the start, and then you can see what the strategy is, and then criticize it. So I don't know how, because you know, in the end, you can always say, look, you know, I tried my best and so on. I didn't mean to do bad things. So I don't know whether these kinds of things of double standards are being discussed in AI technologies.
But I will maybe start answering by yeah, the microphone's there. That at least in simulation, whether virtual or high fidelity, they try to push people to make mistake, and it's kind of there is this good judgment and pre-briefing strategy that they tell participants it's okay to make mistake in this situation, and they put more values into the mistake because it helps the person realize consequences of bad decisions, but also they are in a simulation environment where making mistakes is quite encouraged, and so that I think we learn even more from mistakes than when everything goes well. And it's when we are put in difficult situation and that we kind of need to improvise or find a way through that. Those are the richest experience. So to bounce back, comparing to the self-driving car and so on, this is more, as you say, who's going to take the blame in those cases. In the end, it's always, I suppose, a human in the medical sector, a human that needs to be responsible, even though you have diagnostics assistants that can suggest different pathologies depending on what you gather as information from patients. But I think in this situation, it's still the human medical professional who has even the legal responsibility and so on. So I don't know exactly where to finish my answer to your question, but it's we are at a point in history where we can see how fast the technology is evolving, but that in a sense it still needs to be piloted and driven by a human.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No other questions online, then I thank you so much for your presentation. We have left to be here on site and to experience a little bit this virtual reality too and the potential services it offers to patients. Thank you for being with us online and looking forward to seeing and hearing you in the next I3h reading seminar. Thank you. Bye.